Good afternoon. It's Monday, September 19th. I'd like to call to order the Portsmouth Committee on Arts and Nonprofits meeting for today. And we have some people on Zoom, some people in person. I don't know that we technically have a quorum with 6 board members here. So I think we're going to skip the approval of the August 15th, 2022 minutes, just because I think we need a minimum 7 people in the room to be able to do that. I think just one shy right now. So unless Nico wants to do it already, Nico or Larry, we're close, but not quite there. But it's not. I mean, we've had a few meetings in a row where we've had a quorum, so hopefully October is the next part. I have to check my calendar. I'm going away for a week in October. I might be on the week of this meeting, Barbara. So we'll have to check that calendar. So a lot going on, and a few updates and a few things to talk about, but I don't know that we'll have a full hour's worth of work today. So the AFTA study update is the first thing on the agenda. So Robin.
Yeah, so thank you to everyone. Things are so much better. So we emailed the other day to ask for a quick number, and they sent back the number 334. But I think that that's without the 100 that we paper ones that we sent in. I think that those cross. So we think that we're at least, you know, mid 400s, which is just so much better.
And our goal is 800?
Our goal is 800. Now, of course, it's winter. A lot of things, you know, shut down. But New Hampshire Theater Project, well, they had done a great job with paper surveys when they were in session, as open. But Music Hall, 3S, Rep, Players Ring, Prescott Park had all come in. And 3S, thank you, Beth. 3S did a bunch of paper ones at the Loading Dock concerts.
Oh, great.
And I did one at one of the events the other night. Russ, I want to thank for doing a music hall one. I've done a bunch of music halls. And Lauren, our project manager, did a Players Ring and the Rep. So we just have to keep them going and stay on this track, and we should be good to go. Lastly, we haven't heard yet when we're going to get more information about the financial reporting, but that'll be our next big job to roll that out to people.
So I have a question. The 800 surveys, is the deadline for that December 31st or April 30th?
April 30th.
April 30th, okay.
So we're May, June, July, August. So we're 5 months in.
And we're over half.
And we're over.
And even though it's winter, I mean, we do have a lot of organizations have big events. You know, it may only be one a month or something, like in our case at New Hampshire Art Association, but you know, I'm sure we could hit those, and if we stay on track,
right? Which
we thank you all for.
But it would be great to get back into the Rep. I mean, we do shows Monday, Wednesday through Sunday.
So we're assigning ourselves, so I think Lauren's our Rep, and she will go back.
If I can do anything, it seems like the executive directors are being really accommodated, but I can do anything to help us.
Well, yeah, I'll put Lauren, I'll just tell Lauren that.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would just add that at New Hampshire Art Association, we tried to do it just using the QR code. And unfortunately, I don't think that worked as well, because there are some people that are just more comfortable picking up a piece of paper, even though you think it would be, you know, much easier. It's not for everybody. So, you know, we're going to start doing both, getting both now, because there's just a lot of people. If it's there, they'll pick it up and fill it out. If not, they'll say, oh, I'll scan, I'll do it when I get, you know what I mean? And it gets, the moment is gone. So for what it's worth, I would give both options.
No, that's really a good point, because even at the music hall, for the first night of Telluride, Tina, this is interesting. I had a clipboard, and a lot of people did it on their phone because they were waiting in line, but the clipboard was being passed around, you know, and because people wanted to do paper.
And not only that, but there's something like in our building, if you stand in the back of the gallery, you can't really get Wi-Fi. So it's a very slow process of filling it out, whereas if you have a piece of paper. So that's another thing. In some of the older buildings, the access is not wonderful. So
having both is good. So we're feeling much more optimistic thanks to all of your support. You really heard us.
Well,
we always had
I just have like 6 clipboards there with thing on it. People go, what's this? And then it looks like a big to-do. So that's partly how we got to. Yeah, you're missing out.
One thing I wanted to mention to everybody, because we didn't make much noise around it at the rep, but Ben Hart and Brendan James, who have been co-creative directors for some time, they're homegrown talent as well, have been named executive artistic directors. So they are now the executive directors of the rep, so the 2 of them, which is really exciting because they have been doing that job. You know, they have been doing the job for several years. And we were doing a search outside the organization, and meanwhile, we had exactly what we needed. So that promotion or that job change was made, and we're super excited.
Cool.
Hey, Robin.
Oh, Barbara.
Robin, did you pick up stuff that I dropped off at the library?
Lauren may have, but I'm not sure. But I didn't, so I'll just make a note that she should check again. She calls regularly. So
gotcha.
I'd like to make a pitch to all of the committee members. If you can find time in your schedule over the next 2 months to go volunteer for another organization that's not your own organization to do surveys. I did that for the music hall a couple weeks ago on Saturday when Paul Taylor Dance Company was in town. And it was really a great experience. What's nice about that is, you know, when I'm at the music hall volunteering, I'm not distracted by anything else. When it's not my organization, if I do something in PMI, I'm going to get pulled out from every direction. But if I go over to the music hall, I'll see people I know, but I can tell them why I'm there and what I need them to do. And everyone on this committee has, you know, facial recognition within our community, especially in the arts community. People know who you are. So if they, you know, see you at another organization that's not your own organization, they want to come up and say hello to you. They want to see what you're doing, and it's a great way to draw in the other audience members as well that may not know who you are. It was a really fascinating process. I learned a lot about it doing it, and speaking to people and learning about the audience members and where they're coming from, and lots of comments from people about how happy they were that work like this was being done because they feel like the community at large does not understand the impact of the arts and where it needs to get out about how important this is. I mean, you're preaching to the choir when you're talking to these types of audiences because they are high propensity arts visitors, but you should, if you have the time, I think it's really worth it to go out of your circle and go into another organization, just volunteer for an evening. It was really only an hour of my time. The music hall was kind enough to offer me a ticket to stay that night, and I wasn't able to, unfortunately, but you know, it was just an hour to go over and meet with people and hand out the surveys, and it was really wonderful. Saw a lot of people, and you feel like if everyone on the committee did that once, we'd hit that 800 number pretty quickly. So think about that. And think about where, you know, what other organization in town you could reach out to and go over to and do some surveys in their lobby or entrance or wherever. It'll make a difference that even for like Renee, it's probably hard for you to interact with people on the survey while you're interacting with them on your normal business there at the gallery. If someone else from the committee were there at the door, you know, I found that a lot of people were willing to do it on their phone as they were entering because they were waiting in line. Like that. So it's a little different than putting the QR code in the program and asking them to do it in their seats or something like that. So it worked out pretty well. So I encourage everyone to try that. It's definitely worth it. Anything else on
that? But if you want to do that and then you want to give me a call or a text, I'm happy to coach.
Robin is an excellent coach. She coached me. Yes, and it worked out well. All right, so that's it for AFTA. I'm really happy with how things are going on that. The ARPA funding request status is the next thing on the agenda. And I don't know if Councilor Cook, if you could speak to this a little bit, because there was a work session with the council last week. Maybe you can give us an update on your perspective on that work session.
Of course. I'm sorry I'm joining you all remotely, by the way. We have a kid with COVID, so I'm home for a while. The ARPA session last week was interesting because it was the first opportunity the council had to really look at the breadth of requests we've received. because things had kind of trickled in. I have to say this committee was probably the first to come forward with a request. And the council hadn't really discussed those requests because we had to get through the budget process. And a lot of the funds had already been expended through the prior council's work and then the beginning of the budget process. So we needed to make sure we were addressing all the requests. So at this stage, we received approximately, I believe it was $17 million in requests, a little bit more than that. If you add up all the requests. Now that's requests from various nonprofits in town. It's requests that we have from the city around different projects that are going to occur at the city level, and then also the request from arts and nonprofits. So now the council has to weigh the different requests and make decisions about how we spend those funds. I hope that arts and nonprofits is well positioned because this is one of the few requests that came in under $1 million, frankly. We have a lot of really big requests. You know, at the city level, some of the city projects, those requests are smaller, frankly. You know, it's little projects that at the city level, we think that we can do with ARPA funds, but the city, those decisions are easier in some ways for the council because the council, when doing budgeting, can decide to fund those projects or not through our general budget. So, but those are just projects that have been identified that are ARPA eligible. Whereas the requests we get from nonprofits are a little bit different. These are requests that clearly aren't going to get city funding if they don't get ARPA funding. And that's why I think that arts and nonprofits is pretty well positioned. The request came in early. It's not for a huge amount of the funds, but there's not much left to expend either. So we don't have the big $12 million number that everyone thinks of. You know, we've expended approximately $7 million. So those funds are smaller than we would anticipate, but hopefully we get to some of these requests soon. This was kind of the first phase.
All right, thank you for that update. Do you have any sense for the committee about the timeline on the decision-making process?
I don't. I have no idea what the timeline is going to be. That's a conversation, I think, at this point that I will be having with the mayor to see if they're thinking about scheduling another session. And also, I think that this puts, there's a new committee that was just formed for relief, especially around mental health and service nonprofits. This kind of puts them on notice for, you know, their time frame that they need. They requested to have till the end of the year. And frankly, we have another few years to allocate the funds. But this tells the council that, okay, these are generally the requests we have. This is the urgency around a few of them. And maybe the council then can start allocating some of the funds at least and create a reserve. So that's my hope. I don't know where the other counselors are because clearly we can't have these conversations behind closed doors.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Any questions from anyone? Barbara, go ahead.
Yeah, Councillor Cook, I was part of that meeting on Zoom, and I was a little concerned by the timeline, especially because we made our submission last December, and we finished our marketing pilot in July, and to hear that another committee wanted till the end of the year, that was the one that really concerned me. Hearing somebody say in September, we basically want another 3.5 months. If we go another quarter without any marketing, I'm even more concerned for our fiscal health, you know, from the arts and profits. So do you have any sense? I know we're asking you questions. You probably, you can't like give us the double secret answer, but you know, I'm wondering if the council would say to that committee, that new blue ribbon committee, we need an answer sooner than December 31st.
I don't know. I do know that I'll be having conversations kind of behind the scenes with city staff. I'll talk to the mayor as well. At this point, I can at least do more lobbying because people understand the urgency, because you came and spoke, which I think was really helpful. And so that at least we can approach that. I think, unfortunately, this committee was just established. So it's a new committee, and they really have just had a few meetings to start discussing what they think are priorities. And so they probably won't finish their work until end of the year, at least. That said, there's no reason why we have to stop and say, okay, we need to hear from them first. We can generally, I think, start thinking about, how do we want to allocate the funds overall? What buckets do we want to put it in? At least that would be my argument. And that's the argument I'm going to make.
And Russ, if I might,
yes,
just one clarification for anyone watching this. The Citizen Response Task Force is specifically made up of social services entities, organizations, Crossroads, Gather, etc. So it's not an ARPA review committee. It's just they're focused on that sector and just began their work. So.
Other questions? I think I'd like to share, for the record, and you don't have to take super careful notes on Stephanie. I can share the document with you that I'm about to read from. But I think, for the record, for this group, for anyone from the community or from our elected officials or city staff who are watching this meeting, the New Hampshire State Council for the Arts did a survey this summer with arts organizations from throughout the state of New Hampshire. They surveyed 10 community arts education organizations, PMAC was one of them, 10 museums and galleries, 30 performing arts organizations, and 3 additional organizations that don't fall into those categories. Overall, the respondents' total earned income in the first half of 2022 was 78% of the same period in 2019, pre-pandemic. 28% of the respondents, which is 15 organizations, reported exceeding 2019 income for the time period, but the remaining did not exceed it. And performing arts organizations in particular continue to be the hardest hit. And this is what we're talking about with this program that we're trying to keep on track with marketing our performing arts organizations and arts and cultural organizations in our community. With 2022 earned income at 74% of 2019. So that's a 26% drop over what they were experiencing pre-pandemic. If you want to look at the total of organizations in 2020, these organizations only achieved 41% of the earned revenue that they had done in the prior year in 2019. So that was a nearly 60% drop in earned revenue in 1 year. In 2021, it was even lower, only 40% of their 2019 earned revenue. And in 2022, we're seeing a little bit of a bounce back, 78%. But when you combine 2020, 2021 with this 2022, it's a very dire situation because these types of losses in revenues, over time are going to build up and really significantly impact an organization. Performing arts organizations only achieved 32% of their 2019 earned revenue in 2020, and only 31% of it in 2021. So a lot of people were under the mistaken impression that 2021 was a better year than 2020. But you forget that we had an entire quarter of 2020 that was essentially normal. And we did not have that in 2021. So it's really important for our elected officials and for the community members to know that even if they might go out to a show at the Prescott Park Arts Festival or at the Music Hall or at 3S or at Seacoast Rep and see a full house, that's anecdotal, that's not data. The data is showing that these organizations are still being severely impacted when you look at the entirety of their seasons. So while you may have isolated situations like the wonderful turnout that Prescott Park had for the Indigo Girls, that's not necessarily representative of what organizations all over the state and all over the Seacoast are seeing on a day-to-day basis. So it's really important for people to understand that. And that's why members of this committee speak about the urgency of these funds and the urgency of getting back to helping audiences rebuild their confidence in performing arts organizations. There's no interest in this group to put anyone in danger. And I think that COVID protocols and everything have gone a long way to make sure that audiences remain as safe as possible. But, you know, coming up to 3 years into this pandemic, we need to see some significant recovery, or there's going to be significant danger for a lot of these organizations. Danger that's already there, and it might, you know, manifest itself in more dire results. So we're really appreciative that there is the potential of funding available through COVID relief in the city, but we're getting to a point with this committee where we're starting to worry significantly about how long that process is taking. So I just wanted to get that onto the record for everyone. Is there anything anyone wants to share in light of that, or anything anyone wants to say before we move on to the next agenda item?
Just really quickly, Tina, do you, I know today is Monday, but do you have a sense of numbers from Telluride, which
Yes, I do. Yeah,
seem a little smaller than usual?
Yeah, it's essentially what we reported in FY22. We are still seeing about 20% of our audiences missing. They're not coming back. And that's a very much a blanket overall statement. If we dissect our programming model, film particularly is a challenge for us right now. However, having a film festival helps, but general film programming is actually, I would say it's probably closer to 30% of what it used to be. And then for our larger show productions, we've all had a bunch of home runs, you know, similar to like the Indigo Girls, but people are continuing to be much, much more selective. Even when we're programming artists that have, you know, continue to have great notoriety and popularity, like the Robert Cray Band. That show is probably at 70% of what it would be normally. And then our biggest concern is our holiday programming for this coming December. People are just holding out much, much longer than they ever have on ticket buying decisions. And it's a huge financial risk for us, but one that we feel we have to take to reassure our audience that that particular programming line did not get eradicated, or, you know, it's not gone just because of the pandemic. We're bringing it back, but it's going to take us time to rebuild those really large scale productions.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Tina. Any other comments before we move on? Go ahead, Barbara.
Another comment kind of piggybacked onto Russ's information about the survey. I was part of a discussion with another group with the New Hampshire State Council for the Arts. And one of the things we all agreed on was that while we continue to appreciate the support of donations and donors today, what everyone felt was it's dropped off considerably from 20 and especially 21, that, and whether you want to call it anecdotal, based on, I know what I've spoken with people about, is there's some sense this year that because we're back doing things that we're okay. And the the thing that we need to get out there without sounding always like we're negative is we continue to really count on donations, support, sponsorship, because we're not really okay. We're doing what we do because that's what we do. So when we produce a show, whether it's indoors or outdoors, that's what we do. But we won't be able to continue doing them if it's only 60 or 70% of audiences, because we can't go on taking in less money. That's just the straight facts. And one of the fellows in the group, he was terrific. He said, you know what the problem is we are so used to doing things on a shoestring, like, you know, saving paper clips and recycling file folders, because that's what we do. but there's only so much of that we can continue to do. And throughout the state, that was very clear. It's that I don't know what else I can cut back on or move away from for a little bit. I've done all those things. And I know that continues to be my frustration as well.
Yeah. Go ahead, John.
Well, and I think it's important to recognize that it's not just a loss of earned income. COVID is still a problem in the producing industry.
Yeah.
I don't know who was at that meeting, maybe you were, Courtney, where Ethan from London Barnes said Governor Sununu was there and said, aren't you glad COVID's in the rearview mirror? And Ethan said, I have 21 actors out with COVID and I've had to cancel 2 sold out musicals. And as we're programming this year, we're talking about how can we cast married couples as little as possible, because when you have a large, cast and one person goes out with COVID, I mean, that happened to us last year and we lost over half of one show, which was our best-selling show of that year. So it is still happening and it's still a concern. And for the presenters, they have a show booked with a great artist. That artist gets COVID or someone in their band gets COVID, the show's canceled. So it's still very precarious. And I think that's important to know as well.
Yeah, so basically, it's a lot more than audience confidence. It's a lot more than that. It's a very complex issue. And building audience confidence and getting people to return to the seats in the shows that are working is going to go a long way to the sustainability of the organizations. And I think that's what we're trying to do with that project. Go ahead.
Yeah, just one more comment. I don't think we can ignore what's going on with the market and things, the prices of things, because I know that we're all pretty fortunate, right, sitting here, but we've had to make difficult decisions. Geez, we were planning to go on a vacation this year, a second vacation, maybe not. Now, you can say, well, at least you went on vacation. But if you trickle that down, where people are spending more to put food on their plates, they're not going to go to every show. You're going to say, maybe I'll just go to one this year instead of, and so I think that's something that unfortunately is going to be around for a little while.
Yeah.
I think people are just being more selective. Somebody said that. I don't think it's because of the show COVID is certainly an issue too, but I think it's financial for some folks.
I agree.
Well, and I would just piggyback on that. Anytime you have an anniversary year in the city or the city gets the Olympics, etc., it always draws from contributed revenue pool and sponsorship pool for nonprofits. So you lay that over inflation, and I think all of us, when we're doing our budgets for 2023, need to be really thoughtful about that. I mean, we already experienced it this summer for people, sponsors that were confused about, oh, I thought I was sponsoring the festival, but really they were sponsoring something else. So I think, laying all of those things together, it's going to be a challenging 12 to 24 months, I would say.
Any other comments or questions?
I feel like I have one more thing that I could say, but it's kind of piling on to what others have already said, but a little different twist to it is we're not able to bring the music hall's staffing levels back to what they were pre-pandemic. We have to hold out and wait to see if our full business model returns before we can fill a few more key positions. That continues to put ongoing pressure on the existing staff to continue to wear more hats than they have. I mean, we all wear many hats in nonprofits, but even more hats than we've traditionally needed to. And so as much as nobody likes to talk about burnout with staff, it still is something that I think many of us are still having to manage, is the workload for staff, because it doesn't feel like there is any less expectation on us as a nonprofit to deliver all of what our missions intend us to deliver, including our collaborations with other nonprofit arts and organizations in the community. And I feel like that is where we have to make really hard choices about putting some of those initiatives on hold or under-resourcing them because we just don't have the staff yet. We're just not back to full strength. So until we can get those audiences to return like they were in FY19, we're going to be in a holding pattern on some key initiatives, which is frustrating and disappointing, but it's just part of our reality right now.
Yeah, good points all around. Thank you. Beth.
Hi, sorry, I agree with all of this, so I don't want to belabor any particular point, but I do want to bring it back to the importance of the marketing objectives and for the ARPA request, because I really do feel like when you consider the pandemic, the availability, the disruption of the talent pool, not just the audience pool that's affecting us all, we're going to have to work harder to not just see the past audience return, but to attract new people, to get us up to the numbers that we need to all be at to succeed, to implement our mission, to have our budgets work out and continue to be really active in this community. I know we all follow this one woman's data around audience patterns of behavior and how habits have changed. And if we're seeing this for yet another year, which I think we have been seeing actually a lot of reservation in 2022, then we have to go broader and deeper in our marketing efforts and in our storytelling and in our outreach. And I just want to tie all of this back to a real urgency and need not to see this pilot study, which I'm so appreciative we had the chance to do a pilot program, but it's not anywhere near what we need to have out there in the public.
Thank you, Beth. Any other comments before moving on? All right, I really appreciate everyone's input on that. I think it's really important and really puts into context why we're doing what we do. So thank you, everyone. The next thing on the agenda is the cultural planning process for the cultural plan. So I have a brief update on that. I spoke with Councilor Cook the other day. The City Council had put out a request for volunteers to participate on the cultural planning group and received a few applications, only a couple. It's posted, I believe, on the city website. And I was speaking with Councilor Cook and thinking that a logical next step would be to get a press release out into the community, either a letter to the editor, ask the Herald to run a story or something. I think that we haven't done enough outreach to reach out to the community to get people to say, I want to step up and be a part of this process. And maybe it's a process that each one of us could share through our own organization mailing lists as well. So I'll be looking for some help to put together some type of press release. I'll talk to Howard Altschiller at the Herald to see, at Seacoast Media Group, to see what the options are for getting the word out into the community. Because I have spoken to a few of our committee members in this group about potential leadership roles with the cultural planning process, and there is some interest there. But also in speaking with committee members, there's also a recognition that we may want to gather the full group of people together first before making a decision on who's going to lead the group, and maybe allow it to be a little bit more of an organic process. There need to be someone out in the community that can either co-chair or chair an effort like this. I think that we want to be as transparent as possible in the process. I think we want to involve the community as much as possible in the process, not have there be a perception that this is a group of arts organizations creating a cultural plan for the community, but it's part of the output of this committee to bring in the entire community and various stakeholders within our community to participate in the planning process that then the entire community can be proud of and have ownership in. So really the next step is to do a call for committee members and see if we can get a critical mass of committee members to sign up for this process. And knowing that we do have potential leadership already in the wings, ready to help out with this process, I think we can more organically allow the people who decide to be a part of the group to play a role in determining what that leadership is going to be when we get there. Right.
Sorry for my ignorance around this. Stephanie, is there already a page on the city website that invites people to apply and explains what it is?
Yes.
So we can go there and copy and paste if we want to put it on our Facebook page or get the word out.
In newsletter. It's just a paragraph with a link to the application form.
In the most recent newsletter?
Newsletter for the past month and a half.
I haven't looked at it. Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Just it's copy and pasteable.
Yeah. And I maybe the news hook here, in addition to the urgency of getting this done, is the ARPA request was just presented, and there Jeff McManamy reported on that work session. And it might be good to call out that chunk of what was discussed at the work session, just to elaborate a little bit more to the public. But with some of this data, and I could see a whole story about why this is important. And we're working on the cultural plan as a logical outcome of this.
Good. That's a good point. Genevieve.
Oh, I was just going to ask if you could send the direct link to those of us who
I'll take that and send it to them.
Great, that would be wonderful. And my second question is, they have to be Portsmouth residents, or can they be people that work it?
That's not clear yet. And I, over the past 3 years of my involvement on this committee and on the reopening committee, know that there are people within our community that have a very strong feeling about the participants in these groups being residents. That was not the requirement case for this particular group because the city was looking for executive leadership from a lot of the arts nonprofits in the region, and it would exclude a lot of arts nonprofits executive leadership if there was a residency requirement. I don't know if there is going to be a strong direction. Councilor Cook.
The way that I announced it at the council level was that it's a subcommittee of this committee. So I think you only have to have similar qualifications as you would to be on this committee. So I don't think that that would be an impediment.
Okay. I think that there has to be some strong connection to Portsmouth. So, you know, a resident is automatically qualified by the nature of their being a resident within the community. If it's someone who's living in the neighboring community, but works in the creative industry in our economy and right here in Portsmouth, I think that's a qualifier. If potentially people with other types of connections to the direct art scene within Portsmouth could potentially be qualified. But I do think that's a really good question. I'm not exactly sure how we're going to totally navigate it. That sounds, Councilor Cook's perspective, that the requirement of residency or the non-requirement of residency on this committee may carry over into that. I just think it needs to be logical. I think we need to be transparent and everyone needs to understand.
I think if somebody works in Portsmouth, that should, you know, because not everybody can afford to live in Portsmouth, for example. So getting back to the cost of,
Totally.
I'd love to see representatives from some of the businesses who have been really great supporters of the arts.
Agreed.
Yes, they already get it. They're investors.
Well, and if I may, we also have to be clear when we're doing this, what our expectation of these people, their time commitment and everything will be. Because to say I want to be on a committee is one thing. To say I'm going to work on a committee might be something very different. And as we all know, with staffs being an issue everywhere, it's going to be a challenge for, you know, for example, Robin, maybe a small business wants to be involved, but if they're already short-staffed, to pull somebody away. So we're just going to have to really balance what works, and also we're going to have to be clear on what we expect from these people.
So I guess a next step would be to put together, you know, kind of like short single sheet bulleted list of expectations and responsibilities and goals of what we see this committee doing, or this subcommittee doing, or this work group doing, or whatever we're going to call it, that we can share with people who express interest in being on it. that this is what we view the time commitment as being. This is what we think everyone has to be involved in to achieve the goal. And this is what it's going to take to get to the final product. And one thing I can do is I do have a list of members of this committee who expressed interest in being involved in the cultural planning process. We could put together a offline meeting with members of that group to come together and put these materials together. You know, what the expectations are. Go ahead.
Thanks, Russ. I was just curious, please forgive me if I've missed something, but at one point we talked about a consultant, a paid consultant, to help facilitate this process and define the process that we might all want to go through, which would then help us understand what we were asking for volunteer committee members, where they fit in along the way. And so can you let me know where we're at with that idea of having an objective outside facilitator sort of facilitate the process with the engagement coming from those local residents, arts organizations, people who either live in or love and work in Portsmouth?
Thank you for reminding me of that. Yes, we've spoken about this at length. Without John here today, I don't know that I have specific details other than we have discussed this with the city, that the best case scenario for this is that it's not left entirely in the hands of volunteers, but we contract a consulting firm or a consultant to come in and manage the process and help produce the final document. My understanding is that it was well received by city staff, this concept, and that there was confidence that there would be funding for something like this. The scale of the funding is something that I'm unclear on. I don't know what the scale of the funding is. And anyone who's worked in the nonprofit industry in the past 10 years knows that there's a wide range of costs that could be associated with a consultant coming in and doing a project like this. So I think we need to be realistic when speaking with the city about what it would truly cost to have a consultant come in and really facilitate this process. It's a great point because, you know, that's an alternate path to coming up with the core materials to start the project, is having a consultant work on it with the team as opposed to doing it and then bringing a consultant in after the fact. And it may be a more logical way to approach the process because it's much more efficient if you're working with a consultant who's done things like this in the past to allow them to leverage their past experiences to come up with a plan for how to go about this. I don't know if you have any comments on this, Councilor Cook.
My understanding is that the city is planning to have the funds to hire a consultant. I don't know what the total number is as far as the funds go. But I would assume when we issue an RFP, we would have to issue the RFP with a certain number attached. So that will require a little bit of research, probably on the part of the committee, to figure out essentially, you know, what on average is the cost and what exactly do we want the consultant to do. I know this because I sit on another committee that's been working on an RFP process, the sustainability committee. And they had a subcommittee essentially that defined what they were looking for in a climate action plan. And then they issued an RFP for the climate action plan. In that case, the consultant does all the work. So you don't really have internal work that's being done. So it's a little bit more expensive. Their RFP it's $100,000 RFP for the climate action plan. And that would be typical. I would assume this one's going to be less.
I do have one question. Is there an estimated or target start date for the planning process?
Not per se. I mean, we had originally talked about trying to get it started this fall, and with a goal of achieving the document by the end of this council's tenure, which would be in December of 2023. So it's not a very extensive timeline. However, we're working with an existing cultural plan that we've done before. It's the first time we're doing a second cultural plan. So we can really rely heavily on the previous cultural plan on what worked and what didn't work. We have a model there. So I think it's achievable. The biggest obstacle, well, the two biggest obstacles is that we're still battling with the pandemic, and we have, of course, the 400 coming next year, all at the same time, which makes it challenging. But in my view, it would be ideal if this cultural plan could be something that's submitted to this council before their tenure has ended. There's no means, that doesn't say that it couldn't go longer than that, it could. But that would be a really nice bookend to this group, which in my view was put forth by the current mayor for this term. And like I don't see this group being committed beyond December of 2023. So I'd love to see cultural plan determine what happens in 2024 and beyond. Does someone have a comment? I saw a hand raised. Beth, did you have a comment?
Yeah, and I know Russ, you and I had talked about this earlier, just in passing. I think it's so exciting to see this group continue and bring voice forward and assist, facilitate, contribute to a cultural plan. Where I get a little concerned personally about even putting myself forward for any kind of leadership is that I am a leader of an arts nonprofit, and I don't want to take the voice and the advocacy role, you know, out of possibility for ourselves. You know, I want to be able to be an advocate for arts nonprofits as much as I would want to help and facilitate from all viewpoints. And I think, while I think that's possible, we all know that gets very sticky. And it's, and I want to be very, you know, very transparent. And that's where my personal support for an objective consultant comes in, is because that person could be really clear about the fact that they're holding subgroups and study sessions and work groups around how can the city best work with and support arts organizations in the future. And that's one question of many. You know, then there's public art, then there's how do we support individual artists, and how do we move forward with the finances around, you know, who decides on the 1% or 5% for art, you know, and how that gets spent. I think there's so many questions to a cultural plan that I really want to advocate for just some objectivity, so that those of us who are so engaged don't lose the opportunity to contribute because we're so concerned about being facilitators.
Yep, good point. Go ahead, Matt.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention, just in Sean's absence, and since I was there for a conversation, he has been talking to some potential folks. I know I was at a conversation meeting with UNH Cooperative Extension, and I believe, if I recall, the plan that's currently was a partnership with UMass, and I know we had a conversation with UNH Cooperative Extension about possible partnerships and exploring the plan with them. So I know it's on his radar. I don't know much beyond that, but I'm sure if he were here, we'd probably have more to say.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on this topic? Barbara, I think you and I are going to have to do a little in-between meeting work on this to move it to the next stage.
Right, because, and Beth, you know, the biggest thing for me is that's going to come out of this is whether or not the recommendation stands to have another cultural committee, like an Art Speak, because a lot of your questions will be addressed by that group eventually, and going forward, hopefully, that we don't end up making all of the decisions, but one of our biggest is we need to have another commission, arts commission for the city that then addresses all of these issues, like public art, like 1% for art, whatever. So as I see it, the biggest thing that will come out of this for me is there another Art Speak? Because I will tell you, so many things that I'm bumping up against, even with the 400, are, oh, that used to be Art Speak's job. You know, so, and people look at this and people go, oh, well, what about that group you're in? I'm like, no, that is not our job. Our job is much more like this, not digging in and doing specific jobs. So yeah, Russ, you and I'll have to connect after this and work out next steps.
Yep, excellent. Any other comments or questions on cultural plan? Okay, thank you. That's what we have for the agenda today. Jason, did you want to speak at all to the marketing? We didn't put that on the agenda this month, but I don't know if you had a few closing words on that before we hopefully get some more funding and move that forward.
Yeah, thank you, Russ. So we did receive the final report from Darcy, and obviously it showed kind of the cumulative total of all the impact that the marketing pilot had. I think, the numbers, again, not having something specific to compare, benchmarks, we kind of struggled with that throughout the course of evaluating the program. With that being said, the trend line we saw on so many of the engagement and impressions and reach, we're continuing to head in a very positive direction. I think the learning that we're able to get from that in terms of targeting the specific media channels we use, there's been a lot of good data in the report. So I would encourage everybody to take a look at that. The marketing subcommittee has been putting together some thoughts, kind of recommendations or observations above and beyond what's included in the Darcy report. So I just need to circle back with Beth and Monty to get their final inputs on that. We'll make that available to the rest of the committee as well. But definitely take a look at it. Whatever thoughts you have, please share them with the rest of the group, because certainly somebody else's thinking might identify something that several of us have not picked up on at this point.
Excellent, thank you. Any comments or questions for Jason or regarding the marketing?
That report, assuming it's the same one that you sent me, is posted with this meeting's agenda. So it's on the meeting site on the calendar.
We might have, do you remember, Jason, if we sent Stephanie the most recent one, or was it the one that was presented the last?
I shared with you and Barbara, so I don't know.
Yeah, I think this is an even newer one. I think Ben was the one who shared it, right?
Ben,
I believe I sent Stephanie the most recent.
Okay.
One of the just a couple points that really jumped out at me, I think will be really interesting points for conversation as we move forward and hopefully actually get a real marketing program up and running. The targeting, we certainly saw that our highest engagement, was an older crowd, not surprisingly, more disposable income, easier for them to do day trips in and out of Portsmouth. But there also begs the question, what are we doing from a marketing standpoint? Certainly we want to market to those people who are low-hanging fruit, but long-term, what are we doing to attract a younger audience to Portsmouth? I know a lot of that depends on the programming. We just did Rent, it skewed to a younger audience, and we saw incredible attendance at that event. But I'd love to see in the marketing program, I don't want to give up on youth in our marketing program. I think that's my thought. I don't want to give up on it. I see this a long-term build, but finding that balance between targeting those people we believe are actually going to come right now versus those people who will get into consideration set. So, just a thought. All right.
Yes, okay. Is there anything anyone wants to add before we adjourn our meeting today? Thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it. We'll reconvene in October, and Barbara and I have some work to do between now and then. But thank you for being here and all your work, and we'll see you at our next meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.